Hi everyone, Mike here from BikesbyMike with another cycling related video. I just finished overhauling my Norco commuter bike and it reminded me just how much I love this bike. No frills, it's dated with crappy components, ridiculously harsh ride, but it's a single speed, it was cheap, and it's been my go-to commuter bike for a decade. If you don't already own a single speed or a fixie, let me tell you why it may just well be the best bike for you. Okay, let's get to it. In today's video, I'll start off with a quick look at my Norco. I'll then go through each reason I think you need to buy a single speed. The first is that it's cheap. The second is that it's quiet. The third is that it's great for training. And the last one is that it is super low maintenance. Stick around to see just how low maintenance it is. First, a bit about the bike. It's a Norco, and it's incredibly not interesting. So boring that I don't even recall its year or model name. It's about 10 years old, so maybe a 2013 or 14 model. All I know is that it was cheap, maybe $800. It's got heavy and almost vintage cheap components, a chromoly frame, rim brakes which are now mostly worn out, super heavy wheels, but the beauty in all this is that it's only got one gear. It's a single speed, so I can freewheel with it. But it can also be ridden as a fixie, as the opposite side of the hub has a single fixed cog. So if I wanted to make it a fixie, I could, but I won't. Tried it once, didn't go all that well. But if you're still not sold on single speed, let me give you 4 reasons you should seriously consider adding a single speed commuter bike to your collection. Almost every commuter bike is going to be affordable. There are plenty of good bike options out there that will be much less expensive than any decent road, gravel, or mountain bike. The vast majority of single-speed commuters are priced at or below $1,000 Canadian. Sure, there are some super, uber expensive boutique commuter bikes that come with a hefty price tag, but those are extremely rare in a small niche of an already small bike segment. Almost everyone looking to buy a commuter bike wants something cheap. Weight doesn't matter, components don't matter. Actually, most of us want it to look crappy and be crappy because we don't want bike thieves to choose our bikes when looking for one to steal. We want to be confident that we can lock it up and it'll still be there when we get back. So for the price you paid for a mediocre set of road wheels, you can get a complete single-speed commuter bike for the same price that will do you just fine. If you've never ridden a fixie or single speed, then guaranteed the first thing you'll notice is how quiet the bike is. As good as Shimano 12-speed Di2 is for road and SRAM Axis T-Type for mountain, and they are excellent, you still get quite a lot of noise from the drivetrain. By eliminating the front and rear derailleurs, the pulley wheels, and always having the chain line perfectly straight, makes for a very quiet drivetrain on any single-speed bike. It's so much of a difference from a geared bike that I notice it every time I ride my commuter. A single-speed commuter bike is first and foremost used for utilitarian cycling, basically to transport you from point A to point B for something purposeful. And if you don't get your bike stolen in the process, even better. But it isn't often considered a great bike for training, but it is, especially because it's a single speed. I used to commute by bike from my home to a downtown Toronto office, which was about 10 kilometers one way. The beauty of urban riding in Toronto is that you get a mix of terrain and the riding conditions are so varied. You have great dirt trails like the Belt Line that runs through the Midtown area. It's an old decommissioned rail line that has been repurposed into a multi-use path. Most of it is bikeable except for the odd staircase you need to carry your bike up or down. Most of my route is on paved roads over rolling terrain with lots of traffic lights and even more stop signs. Perfect for interval training where I can do power bursts between intersections and up short punchy hills. Great to increase muscular endurance. And since I'm always stuck in a big gear, I'm able to train riding at a low cadence and high torque, which I don't often do on a geared bike. Now we get to my biggest and best reason you should consider a single-speed commuter bike. It is way more low maintenance than any other bike you'll ever own. Whether you service your bike yourself or take it to a shop, it'll save you hundreds if not thousands of dollars over the life of the bike. And who doesn't want to spend less time maintaining their bike? Not having to watch long YouTube videos from boring home mechanics trying to figure out how to maintain one's bike. Where am I going with this? The thing is, even if you don't mind or even enjoy working on bikes, sometimes it's nice to not have to do anything, especially if you own multiple bikes. And the beauty of a cheap single-speed commuter bike is that it requires less maintenance for two basic reasons. First, because it's a commuter bike, you won't care about it as much as your good bikes. Performance isn't all that important for utilitarian bikes, and most riders just aren't all that concerned about maintaining cheap bikes. The second reason is that there are fewer parts that require maintenance, and those that you do have will require less maintenance. The great thing about heavy, low-end bike components is that they tend to be very durable and require much less servicing than higher-end, lightweight, precision parts. While the steel components found on most commuter bikes are super heavy, on the plus side, they last a lot longer than comparable parts made out of aluminum and carbon. Let's take a closer look at how much less maintenance your single-speed commuter bike will require over a typical road bike. I'll use my Cannondale Super 6 EVO road bike and my Norco single speed as examples. First, let's look at some of the components on a typical geared road bike that you just don't have on a cheap commuter. Most single speeds have rim brakes, not disc brakes, so no need to ever worry about a brake bleed. There is also no front or rear derailleur that could fall out of adjustment, and also no multi-gear cassette or pulley wheels to wear out. Guaranteed your commuter bike won't have electronic shifting like on most high-end road bikes, so no batteries that need charging or ever need replacing. And as much as I like running tubeless tires on my road, mountain, and fat bikes, for a commuter I always go with cheap tubed setups, so no need to fill tires with sealant every 4 months. Now let's consider the components on a single-speed commuter that typically require less servicing than ones you'll find on an expensive geared bike. The lifespan of bicycle components is influenced by a lot of factors such as riding conditions, the specific model you're running, and how well one cares for their bike between servicing. I'll show you the life expectancy I've gotten out of my components, which is within the typical range reported by most riders. But again, expect some wild variations based on specific circumstances, so don't be surprised if your results are different than mine. Plus, I usually replace my components earlier than most riders, so the figures I'm showing may be a bit on the low side. Let's start off with a pretty common bike maintenance task, especially if you run disc brakes. I typically get about 5,000 kilometers of use on my disc brake pads, but get about double that for my rim brake pads on my commuter. Life expectancy for single-speed chains is always longer than comparable geared versions. I replace my 11 and 12 speed chains every 8,000 kilometers or so, and get over 16,000 kilometers on a single speed. If you run a well-maintained wax chain on a 12-speed cassette, you could get around 10,000 kilometers of life out of it, provided you're not riding in wet or dirty conditions. With a steel single-speed rear cog, you should easily be getting 20,000 kilometers on it. I've never worn mine out, nor have I ever worn out my front chainring on any of my commuter bikes. Many experts say that a steel chainring can last well over 40 kilometers, and I usually get 18,000 kilometers of life out of a typical aluminum road chainring, which is still pretty good. Bottom brackets are probably the component that's most difficult to predict longevity. I've had ones that lasted only a couple months. They were press fit 30s. And others that lasted the life of the bike. They were also press fit 30s. Most riders agree that 20,000 kilometers is a good life expectancy for a bottom bracket, so I say both bikes are equal on this one. But the BB on my commuter is super cheap, has crappy bearings, and I've put it through a lot of wet and dirty riding conditions. So even if my bottom bracket fails on my commuter, I really don't care because it's so cheap to replace. Even though the quality of wheel and hub bearings on a typical road bike will be much better than the standard commuter, you're likely to get more life out of the bearings on the single speed. Usually the lighter the wheels and the hubs, the smaller the bearings. Smaller bearings will wear out faster than larger ones of comparable quality. For me, I get less life out of my DT Swiss 180 hubs than I ever did from lower end hubs, due mainly to the smaller cartridge bearings used to save a few grams. So expect somewhere around 7,000 kilometers for quality steel cartridge bearings, and 10,000 kilometers for more robust, larger bearings found on many commuter bikes. I've never had to replace the wheel bearings on my commuter bike, and while they're not super smooth, they're good enough for riding around town. You're not going to replace grips or handlebar tape as often on a commuter bike as a road bike. You just won't care as much about its looks. So expect about 8K of life for a road bike and more than 12K for a commuter. Tires designed for commuting will be more durable and wear resistant than performance road tires. I get about 8,000 kilometers on my Continental GP 5000s and 10,000 kilometers plus on my Gator Skins. My commuter tires don't usually need replacing for excess wear. It's usually that they are so old that the rubber has become brittle and the sidewalls have begun to crack. I like to keep my high-end road wheels perfectly true and tensioned, so I'll service them every 10,000 kilometers or so. Just last month, I retensioned my commuter bike wheels for the first time in 10 years. They still spun quite true, although spoke tension dropped to the point of needing retensioning. So that is pretty much it for why my single-speed commuter bike is my favorite bike of the lot. If you don't already own a single-speed, I hope you find something in this video that piques your interest. Hey, for a bike that costs less than a power meter, how can you go wrong? Oh yeah, that video I did on why you shouldn't buy another bike, it's rubbish. Don't watch it. That's all I got for today, folks. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you're not a subscriber to this channel, please subscribe as allow me to produce more content for all of you. See you next time. Happy rolling.